Hey everybody, welcome to InPsightRadio. I am your host, Danielle Egnew, and you are a fly on the wall to everywhere. Oh my goodness, how are you? Hey, I'm cutting this particular episode ahead in our podcast lineup because I've been away for a bit and I wanted to come and say hello and I'm alive, and I wanted to thank everybody for their immense patience during this time. If some of you didn't know, I had a really interesting occurrence. My gallbladder blew up. Yeah. So I kind of had to go get it removed. I had about 3 hours notice they were going to remove it. And so that kind of laid me up on blocks for a while. And it's really interesting because when you look at health and wellness, the gallbladder, especially with Chinese medicine, is considered an area that works as an aquarium filter for anger. For anger in the ethers. Like if you're around angry people, or maybe you're angry or something's going on. And so does the liver. The liver also works as a filter for these areas. So it was really interesting that the two gallbladder attacks that I have ever had in my life, okay? The first one, I didn't even know it was a gallbladder attack, actually. And it was the day after the election in 2016. The day after, I had the worst pain. I can't even explain it to you. It felt like somebody stuck a double-barrel shotgun right underneath my solar plexus and just pulled the trigger. It was rough. It was horrible. And it went on for a few days, and then it went away. And it went away for 4 years. So I honestly figured that it was something energetic going on with the 2016 election and how upset people were about that. And as it turns out, that's kind of a thing. I mean, as it turns out, that's a deal. However, it was related to gallbladder. So then, get this, I didn't have one stitch of gallbladder problem at all, nothing, until the day after Joe Biden was confirmed as president. And I was moving my painting studio, I'm an oil painter, and I was moving my painting studio to another location. And on the drive there, I was hit with the most acute pain, and it was ridiculous. I mean, really, honestly, you remember that movie Phantasm, where they had those balls that would fly through the air and they had blades on them? It felt like something like that had exploded right at my solar plexus. And thank God my wife was there and my sisters-in-law were there. But anyway, 3 hours later, I end up in the emergency room and they told me, you get a non-expense paid trip to the operating room, and out the gallbladder came. Yet again, this happened the day after Joe Biden was sworn in as president. So I kind of can't help but look at the commonality here. It's pretty amazing that the two gallbladder attacks I had were after big national feelings of discontent. Obviously, in 2016, people saying, how the heck could that have ever happened? And then in 2020, just millions of people who actually believed that Donald Trump won the election and were just stunned when they swore in another president, especially after the Capitol insurrection attempt, on the 6th of January. So it was very interesting and very odd. However, it does take a minute to get, back to speed from getting an organ removed. So I really appreciate everybody's patience, gang. And I'll tell you what, my poor podcast manager has had these mostly done podcasts that we've been working on, and I had little bits and pieces to add to all of them, and then I got laid up. So sorry. They were trying. I was just sort of laid up. However, you can expect to have a whole bunch of podcasts hit the publishing waves here, just one after the other. So if you see a whole bunch come on, that's because I'm whacking out the rest of the content before I had my little, vacation, as it were. Anyway, I am so glad to be back here with everybody. And I wanted to let everybody know that while I was laid up, I had the most fascinating opportunity to really kind of do some research. And I replaced a couple of podcasts in the lineup with some other podcasts because I felt that there was more timely, really stuff that needed to be covered. So with that in mind, I'm going to launch right into our podcast today, which is, I can't even say it with a straight face, Woke, Awakened, or Wacked. And I want to get into this because I've been watching a phenomenon happen while I was laying there, with my guts getting stitched back together, just reading, because that's about all I could do. I was noticing this wild uptick in the term woke. And you may or may not have heard this term. It's actually a term that is now being, in my opinion, co-opted by the metaphysical community from the African American community, who really had this word woke that meant that you were aware. You were aware of racial injustice. You were alerted to the injustice in society, especially racism. And so all of a sudden I'm looking around and I'm seeing this word woke being utilized by the metaphysical community. Now, a person can be woke who is of any ethnicity, yet it's a term that's supposed to be used in terms of, hey, I'm woke. In other words, I'm not going to sit here and let people be mistreated and marginalized because it's time that we really get our racial justice P's and Q's in a row. So you can imagine my surprise as I look out through the metaphysical community, and what am I seeing? Well, I'm seeing person after person using the term woke to mean enlightened or awakened. And I suppose that if you really think about the way that the term woke is used, that we could potentially say, okay, well, if you were a non-racist person, I would hope that there is a semblance of thought or consciousness or even mild enlightenment involved in that. Yet it's really been bugging me because yet again, here is the African American community saying we are woke. Here we are. We're not going to put up with people choking us out and treating us like second-class citizens. And here is a very predominantly white metaphysical community running in and taking the word woke and using it to mean I'm enlightened or I'm awakened or I've become this person who is woke, not meaning I'm open to social justice issues, which I'm sure there's a number of people in the metaphysical community who are actually using the term woke as it was intended. So if you're one of those people, just blow this off. Yet I'm noticing a massive amount of people who don't know what it freaking means, who are using the word woke to mean ascended or awakened or enlightened. And I have to tell you, it's really gross. It's icky. And I mean, I'm even seeing it in other aspects. I was looking at a documentary on a particular streaming service that talked about interviewing this woke section of individuals. And I went and looked at the trailer for this, and nobody was talking about racial justice issues. Nobody was talking about anti-racism, anything. It was all these 20-somethings talking about, I just really feel like we live in the fifth dimension, and I really feel like, life is more than we make it to be, and I'm woke, and I feel that as a woke person, I really need to teach other people how to live in the fifth dimension. Now look, I know I'm going to sound old and crotchety, and I know I just had an organ ripped out, but come on! I mean, do we have to steal everything? Can we just come up with another term? Just because the term woke became an accepted form of terminology from our African American community to mean pulling your head out of your keister and actually getting into the game to defy racism and to care about social justice. I mean, honestly, can white people, can we just make up our own word, right? Why do we always have to? God, we're so unoriginal. So here I'm looking at some Caucasian people who happen to be female who are using the word woke to mean that they are enlightened, not only just enlightened or awakened, yet that they're using it to describe being an avid conspiracy theorist. They're woke. Boy, they're woke. They know that Bill Gates is sticking microchips in our brains through all of these COVID vaccines and, oh my God. And they're using the word woke. So this really bothered me. It really bothered me not only for those in the African American community who really have forged this word into existence in a very poetic way, yet I'm listening to these metaphysicals, and they're all woke because they know that Bill Gates is chipping them. And they're all woke because they understand that 5G is like here to make us into Manchurian candidate bots who are going to eat children and be Satanists. And I literally could not believe what I was reading. I couldn't. Now listen, if you're somebody listening and you use the word woke to say that you are an enlightened person or you've awakened in your life to the fact that there is a spiritual existence out there, or you're not seeing things the way that you saw them, I kind of get why you're using it that way because everybody's using it that way now. Yet, let's get to the bottom of my real issue with this. Not only is it just ripping the word off and changing its meaning just because it sounds cool, that bums me out. Yet it's the fact that we need to label ourselves as enlightened people. So for the purpose of this podcast, I'm talking about the word woke as ripped off from the African-American community and as co-opted by a lot of non-African-American metaphysicals out there who want to talk about how woke they are because they can see through this or that. They're in the fifth dimension and they're woke. First of all, it's not really a fifth dimensional issue to be a non-racist person. That's like just being a decent human, okay? So if you're woke because you're a white person who's non-racist, well, good for you. But the word again is meant that you are awakened out of your sleep of just having to put up with being oppressed because of racial injustice. So cringe, white people, okay? And I'm not saying you can't say be white and use the word woke, but can we at least understand that it's a social justice term? It is not a fifth dimensional metaphysical term that means that you are enlightened. What is the deal? What is the deal with people needing to feel special? I don't, maybe I'm just old. I'm going to turn 52 in a few days, and maybe I'm just old. And I don't feel like I need to distinguish myself as somebody super special because I've achieved a level of knowledge, And if you're somebody who feels that's important, well, rock on. Let's use some different words, though. How about enlightened or awakened or alerted? Let's just leave woke where it's supposed to be, as a social justice term. I am so weirded out that in our metaphysical community, we are so dedicated to having to prove that we are more enlightened than another person. If you're a person who needs to tell people how enlightened you are or what a master blah blah you are, I understand for promotional purposes if you are a Reiki master, as in you have gotten the proper training and you've achieved that level, and you're using that as a title, I get that. However, just to go on and on about how enlightened you are, it means you're not real enlightened. Look at our spiritual teachers. Look at Jesus. Look at the Buddhas. They really didn't walk around saying, I am so woke. I talk to God and I'm woke. I'm woke, man. I'm never going back on my wokeness. I'm wokety woke. There's nobody woker than me. I woke. Honestly, I can't even. I just can't even. My woke brings all the boys to the yard. Come on. I don't get it. I just don't get it. So I was in a conversation with a friend the other day who was using this term, very well-meaning, very sweet Caucasian female, very well-meaning female, who was talking about, I've got through my divorce and I'm woke now. I'm woke. And I said, oh, were you formerly a proponent of oppressing people of color? And there was this big pause, right? And she goes, what? I said, well, you said you're woke. Were you formerly not aware that people of color were being oppressed or were you formerly standing by while it was okay and just letting them be killed? And now you're finding your voice in that area? And she literally said, what are you talking about? And I started laughing and I explained to her what woke means. Okay. And again, people, I understand it's English and we wiggle terminology a little, but what I'm really addressing is not only co-opting a term that really stands for something very specific, yet if you're a metaphysical person or a person who follows spiritual teachings and you are using woke as a description for your awareness, why? Oh, why? My woke brings all the boys to the yard. Damn straight, it's better than yours. I mean, I could teach you to be woke, but I'd have to charge. I mean, really, it's not a competition. It's not an identifying factor. Being enlightened is not a competition, and it's not an identifying factor. And I tend to be suspect when folks begin to use these terms to talk about how enlightened or how smart or how spiritually gifted or whatever they are. And I mean, I can say I am woke in that I am very aware of social justice issues, but you're never going to hear me talk about that in terms of my metaphysical applications or how I feel I'm enlightened or awakened was a big one. Every few years, the metaphysical community comes up with some fancy new word that talks about how super cool we all are because we've noticed something about our physical or spiritual world or the quantum world that we hadn't noticed before. And for some reason, we need a terminology for this to say, well, I'm part of the woke club. And obviously, woke doesn't even mean woke in that way that we use it. Yet, I mean, you can also mean woke, I suppose, of being aware and socially aware. However, most people, when they say it, are they're not talking about being socially aware. They're talking about being spiritually aware or having found out something about themselves that they didn't know. It's usually a term about themselves, about their own journey and where they're at, as opposed to noticing something that's been going on for a really long time that's just disgusting. Okay? So, metaphysical folks, let's start to move away from the need to label ourselves as super enlightened, because that just points out we are just not very enlightened. We're just not. And I remember reading these articles while I was laid up after my gallbladder surgery about, again, not to say you can't be a white person who's woke, okay? Yeah, let's just please use the word properly. God. There were these celebrities who shall remain nameless because I'm not an unkind person entirely. Come on. And they were talking about how they've branched into areas of spiritual development and meditation and yoga and understanding that we're all a collective race as beings, as human beings. And they went on and talked about how, they're woke now. And I thought, well, okay, so were you not aware of social injustice or you were just putting up with it before then? I mean, it's so awkward when it's used improperly. And the bigger issue is I'm saddened by how we as humans really have to make sure that we've got the cool label so that people think we're the cool kids before anybody will listen to us or not listen to us. I have declined opportunities to speak at certain conferences because people were going to bill me a certain way, and I've asked them not to bill me that way, yet they were going to bill me that way anyway. And so I've politely declined, citing the fact that I could not be the person that they were wishing me to be. And they would write me back and say, oh, but you are this angelic master. You are this ascended being. And we want you, they wanted to bill me as an ascended being or an angel master. And I'm like, angel masters? That's like some whacked out, effed up BDSM thing that I'm not aware of. Come to my angel master cave and I'll teach you what it means to get your wings pulled. I was like, angel master? Wow. And I'm not trying to be insulting to the people who really found that the work I did was deserving of esteem. I'm not trying to shame those folks at all. I'm trying to point out that when I declined being called an angel master or an ascended being, that they became very uncomfortable with that because they wanted to use that as a marketing device to get people to go to a particular conference. And this is, before 2020 hit, it was in 2019. Yet they wanted this to be, it was a marketing tool, to make me sound, 2 clicks off of Jesus maybe. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, you cannot call me an angel master. That also implies one can be a master of angels, which is very strange. So all I had in my mind, like this leather daddy outfit with little bitty wings, on the back of that leather harness that crisscrosses a guy's chest, right? These little bitty wings back there. And I thought, well, what do? Hang them up by the wings and Spank them with their halo? What does an angel master do? God, how much do they charge an hour if you're the angel master in the dungeon? I don't know. I just couldn't. And so, I figured, I really expected these folks to write me back and say, okay, well, what would you be more comfortable being called? Which is angelic translator. I'm an angel translator. I'm very comfortable with that. I'm a psychic. Technically, I'm a medium, but I prefer translation. I'm a spirit translator. And because mediumship really does imply talking to only humans and only dead humans. And I speak to many different beings, whether they're elemental or off-world or human, or sometimes you've got some angry, chaotic, dark beings that want to pop in. Demonic life doesn't really talk to me much. I don't talk to it much. We kind of do our own things. But angel master, I just couldn't go there. So, my issue here with the word woke, clearly, is about the need to elevate a person in a particular way in the spiritual community. And it has zero to do with people using the word woke. I'm woke, meaning I'm aware of the crap social justice issues we've got to deal with. I'm not talking about that. That's actually a term for a reason. I'm talking about a co-opted word that means you're special or awakened, so it's being used improperly. And I've noticed that people who really are stuck on the word woke, now not everybody, so I'm hoping I'm not just offending everybody in giant droves here today, but if I am, I deeply apologize. Yet I cannot apologize for actually feeling this way and thinking this way, because I do. This is my opinion, that when we're out there using that word woke in the spiritual community, it's so cringy because it goes back to the need to set oneself above others. And I've been noticing also that some of the people who use the word woke most frequently in the metaphysical community, I think a lot of people are accidentally not using it correctly, to be quite honest. I don't think people are trying to sound like a cringy tool. I just think it's coming out that way because it's been co-opted so quickly that folks aren't really understanding what the word means. Yet I've noticed that a lot of people who in the metaphysical community who really want to use the word woke a lot, wokester, wokorama, woka ding ding. They are people who are also, again, they're heavily conspiracy laden. And I've noticed that there's a big chunk with this QAnon phenomenon of our metaphysical community that has really been drawn towards deep conspiracies and some really out there stuff, in my opinion. I deal with angels and they kind of give me a scoop on what's going on. And so, as I've said in a couple of podcasts ago, I've yet to find a big demonic collective of people eating children all over the place. And I don't even, wow. So I noticed that the folks who want to claim woke also tend to lie in the bed of those ideologies, which even makes me cringe harder. Because here is this term that means I'm alerted to racial injustice. And you've got people who are trying to convince folks that microchips exist in vaccines that are going to get in our brains and turn us into socialist zombies. Yes. So it's rough. And why do we do that? Why do we need to set ourselves apart so hard? Why do we need to be the authority? Because that's really what it's about, to be more wokety woke a ding dong than somebody else in the metaphysical community apparently means that you are more enlightened or you are more special or, oh, you see the light while everybody else is in the dark. It's a distinguishing tool that I don't care for when it's improperly used. And the reason I don't care for it is because it undermines what we're trying to do as a spiritual community on this earth, on this planet, as a species, which is to come together to make this world a better place for everybody. And that's really hard to do when we're busy kind of claiming we're just a little more enlightened and special. It's a really weird form of hierarchy in the spiritual community. And I've had people write to me and tell me that because I don't believe that microchips are in vaccines and because I wear a mask still in our 100 days of wearing a mask, that I'm not woke enough. And I write back and say, actually, I'm a huge, social justice supporter. And then I never hear back from them because they're like, what the hell? Why? Why do we do this? Well, we came out of the old imbalanced patriarchal that was heavily shame-laden. So everybody was kind of struggling, if you will, to find their own voice and to find their ability to avoid shame. And the way to avoid shame was to be an expert. So we have this whole giant group of human beings running around working to be the expert. Because as long as you're the expert, nobody can shame you, right? And again, there is no being an expert in spirituality. There's no litmus test here. It's not like my spirituality is better than your spirituality. I mean, hey, if people want to believe that there's microchips in vaccines and they want to believe that that's an issue of spirituality, they are free to do that. The only exception I take is when they get mad that I don't believe that. I don't care if they believe that. Honestly, I mean, I might think it's a little odd, but they probably think it's odd that I don't believe that people are being microchipped in vaccines. So whatever. Yet I've noticed the folks who really, really have got to stand behind their opinion will layer themselves with titles. They're a master this, they're a woke that, they're a blah. And again, gang, we've got to give people a little bit of grace with all this because we came from an old world that demanded that we do that we make sure that we tell people we're the angel master or whatever. I mean, I still don't get that. I don't get the angel master thing. Anyway, people were trained in the old world that they had to be the superior person in any field to avoid being shamed. Now, where this gets sticky, it gets sticky all over the place, is especially with spirituality. Spirituality is a practice, and there is no perfect way to do it, and there's nobody who's more holy or more righteous than anybody else. And someone's genius may lie in an area that someone else has a blind spot and vice versa, but it doesn't make someone stupid and someone brilliant. It just means that we all have such varying degrees of brilliance. And when I really start to see that people are grabbing a term and running around and hanging banners up that are their wokeness, and especially when they're not talking about racism and social justice issues, and they're talking about being enlightened, that's what they're trying to say is I'm enlightened, but they use the word woke. And maybe a person can be enlightened if they're woke in the area of social justice. I get that. Yeah, please understand what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about the folks who are using woke as the word enlightened. And it drives me nuts. It drives me nuts because not only are we taking focus off of something really important, which is being made aware of racism and social justice issues by co-opting the word woke into the metaphysical community to now mean somehow spiritually enlightened, or I'm enlightened because I supposedly believe in microchipped vaccines, or enlightened because I supposedly don't believe in wearing a mask, and so I'm enlightened and I'm woke. I mean, do you see what I'm laying down here, gang? So I'm laying there with an organ removed, not able to do a whole lot, reading about these people saying I'm woke, meaning I'm enlightened, and not meaning social or racial justice issues at all. They're talking about, I believe in the fifth dimension, or I speak to aliens. I'm woke, I speak to aliens. And I think to myself, now are we racist against ETs? Did the ETs get in? Did the Proud Boys have the anti-ET section? I bet they would. Oh my God, I bet they'd have a favorite section for the white ETs. And any ETs with just kind of weird skin colors, boy, they are on the hit list. I mean, honest to God, gang. I think that it's hard, not to get sucked into wanting to define ourselves as someone who's more special than someone else because of our awareness or whatnot, because of the fact that the old world has pitted us against each other from the get-go. That's a very common oppression technique, is to make sure that everyone that you're trying to keep under your boot heel is fighting with one another, or somehow creates a hierarchy where one person believes that they are more superior to the other person in a certain way. And I've been kicked out of a lot of Facebook groups, a lot of them, because I'm not, quote, woke enough, end quote, meaning enlightened enough, or I just don't play the game very well, My woke shake brings all the boys to the yard. It's not something I can really do well. And I understand that there are some people out there who are still seeking their spiritual and personal identity. And therefore, in all of this seeking, they may fall into some of this woke, awakened, enlightened stuff that people get into. Yet my hope for folks is that we begin to understand that, we can say things like, yeah, I have really educated myself a lot on spirituality, and I'm in a whole different space than I used to be, without having to say I'm woke, meaning I'm enlightened, meaning I'm talking about a vaccine in the fifth dimension, not social justice issues. And I don't mean to labor this point to death. It's just that some of the most way out there stuff that I've seen online, and again, I read a lot of this stuff when I was recovering, is attached to people who claim they are woke. I'm woke. And I can't help but think, geez, can we not ever stop claiming how awesome we are because we're so afraid that people are going to see how scared we are? And again, I'm not talking about folks who might be using the word woke or the term woke. They don't really understand what the term means. And maybe there's just some misunderstanding there in how they're applying it to themselves. And I get that because it's being misused wildly. So pretty soon it's going to mean something else if I just give it another month or two. Yet I think about why it's so important for us as we talk about the shaming issues of the old world to be the expert and why it's so important to have these big titles. The older I get, and I'm not old, I'm in the middle of my life, yet the older I get, geez Louise, I just feel like I almost want to distinguish myself less and less. My standout factors, I want to erase those standout factors more and more. Because what I'm recognizing is that we are all so special, gang. Every single one of us are so unique. And I'm not saying don't brag about what you're good at or don't shout out about your gifts or talents. I'm not saying don't let people know that you are a PhD or that you're a Reiki master after you've studied really hard to become that person. I'm saying, wouldn't it be cool if everybody really on some level was appreciated for their genius? And I do understand that there's a need for titles. There are a need for distinguishing factors. A PhD, a person with a PhD in mathematics, is likely going to know a little bit more than somebody with a bachelor's degree in mathematics. So it's important to have those distinguishing factors, especially when you're looking to hire somebody or you're looking for help on a project. Yet I can't help but think, how many of us are really needing to really delineate our professional acumen against the rest of the world day to day. And especially when we're talking about who we are as people in the world. And again, if you're somebody who's really into the word woke, just knock yourself out. Do your thing with it. I'm never going to be woke enough for that crowd because I don't believe that I'm woke in that way. I believe that I'm woke in terms of social justice. I do not believe that I am enlightened. I do not believe that I'm ascended. I do not believe that I'm a master. I believe that I am a person who is in continual growth. And there are certain concepts that I have a wild aptitude for. And therefore, because of the wild aptitude and my interest in pursuing those concepts, may have some mastery of. Okay? Yet to call myself a master, I wouldn't call myself a master. I've had a lot of other people call me this or that. Well, I've had people call me all kinds of things. However, to be a master of something, what does that mean? Does that mean that you walk around saying, I'm the shit, I'm the master? Is that what it means? I would hope not. Because the more mastery you have, the more of a servant you become. And that's what I've found. Can I look at my professional resume and can I say I am an, quote, expert or a very knowledgeable person in many fields? Well, yeah, I absolutely can, especially in music production. Good heavens, I can look at that all day long and say, yeah, I've probably earned the title producer because I have, because that's what I've been for 20 years. Yet in terms of spirituality, I don't see where I understand if, like I said, you're saying you're a Reiki master or letting people know where your skill level is at if they're going to take classes from you or whatnot. But I can't say I feel like I'm a master of much of anything except for constantly being in a space of learning. And I'm constantly in a space of humility on the other end of the universe with these angels. And yes, I have a sense of humor. I had somebody tell me one time that you can't be humble if you're making fun of something else. And I said, well, yeah, you can, especially if you're making fun of you. If you're making fun of yourself, you can have a sense of humor. You can take your work seriously, yet not necessarily take the world that seriously or take concepts that seriously. But you can take how you apply your heart and your gifts that may even be exalted gifts. You can take that very seriously. And I take it seriously how I apply my work in the world. I'm just really finding that I think we're beyond time. I think it's overdue to give back and give away the ideology of having to be the superstar, the supermaster, the best of this, the best. Is there a best? Maybe there really is a best. Maybe there's a best psychic in the world. Maybe there's a best preacher in the world. Maybe there's a best religion or a best spiritual teacher. I have a hard time believing that. Just from the perspective that there are so many people who need different things from different people. And is it cool to be voted the best of something? Yes, I've been voted the best of things, and it makes you feel super good. Yet I kind of take the title with a little bit of a grain of salt. It's just like a fun thing. I don't actually think I'm the best of the blah. Kneel before the angel master. Really? Come on. I'm very honored that I would win a best of title. That's awesome. Yet I don't take it super seriously because we're all the best at something. And when it comes to spirituality, we are all learning. And if a person is insisting on referring to themselves as enlightened because they are trying to use that as a road marker of the miles they've traversed and put in their rearview mirror, I can somewhat understand that if it's in reference to something specific. As in, well, I never used to believe in UFOs, but as I've become more enlightened in my education, I now realize that life on other planets are actually the mathematical probability. In that case, that makes sense. Yet to just say, I'll see in people's Facebook bios, and again, I'm not trying to bring shame to these people. I'm not shaming anybody. These are bios that I've seen that say enlightened master teacher, or someone will refer to themselves as this, whatever, angel master or whatever. And I'm certainly not trying to shame those folks. I am simply saying that when I see that, I think to myself, wow, that's quite a proclamation. And I guess apparently you're done growing, because to claim to be the enlightened master teacher, I would suppose that means there's no more room for growth there because you just hit the other side. And again, this is not trying to shame anybody. I'm simply saying that why do we feel this need to do that? Do we feel like people won't listen to us unless we call ourselves the angel master? Now I need to get a shirt that says angel master. That's funny. However, I don't get it. And I think I don't get it because it separates us, gang. You know what I mean? It separates all of us. For me to be the master and you to be the unenlightened student. Oh, that's so weird and inaccurate, and it's just uncomfortable, and I just don't think I'm enough of a narcissist to really enjoy that. And again, I think it's important that we recognize where our strengths lie or where our education lies. That's different than trying to claim to be on the other side of enlightenment. And I think there's ways we can say woke in its misuse without saying woke. How about, I don't know. I'm such a nerd. I make up very wordy titles like really enthusiastic chaser of metaphysical arts, or aficionado of quantum thinking, or, whatever, like something fun that talks about your hobby that you love. I love physics. And I'm constantly working on physics equations that explain dimensional harmonics, because I really believe if we can do that, then we can kind of point to why the dark energy takes up 75% of the universe, right? It's a resonance thing. However, it's this process of writing these mathematical formulations. I don't think I'm the master of math. I don't think I'm the angel master. I don't think I'm the dimensional master. I'm just somebody who really enjoys this stuff. I'm a physics nerd. I love it. It's super fun. So maybe if we just began to lean forward in the world, because it's going to be a long time before humanity is ever able to give up identity. We need to have individual identities. I think it's going to be a really long time before we give up labeling ourselves in certain professional identities in certain ways, because it's such an ingrained behavior. And we're so taught that if we don't rise to that occasion and have those fancy titles, that no one will take us seriously. And there are titles you do earn, executive director or PhD, or if you do go through a training program and the graduation terminology is Reiki Master, got it. Yet, how about just having some fun and leaning forward in the world with our identities in a heartfelt way, in a goofy way, in a way that's not like I have to be the best, but a way that just really, really frames up who we are. I like at one point I had on one of my social media accounts years and years and years ago, prattling physics junkie. And somebody got a hold of me and said, the word junkie is probably not very appropriate in this day and age. And that was back in the mid-2000s. In Los Angeles. So I removed it, and I put something on there like prattling physics enthusiast, because I'll go on and on and on about it. Why don't we let our work speak for our knowledge base rather than trying to say, look who I am? And I understand that sometimes you got to lead with a title because nobody knows who you are. I get that. Yet think about what the world would be like if we weren't all faking it till we made it and we just made it better. Think about that. If we weren't all faking it till we make it with titles and, I'm the master of all angels and I'm this and I'm that and I'm this being translator that I am the only one that can translate for this secret ET race. Boy, there's a lot of ET translators now. And I'm the only one who can decode this light language that people are talking about. Sidebar with the light languages. You can find many people speaking light languages online. And it's a form of communication that's energetic, that will come out people's mouths, and weirdly sounds a lot alike from person to person. And it reminds me of when people back in the day in the old church, and in the traditional evangelical churches, people would speak in tongues. And, we've heard that term usually in comedy sketches or whatnot, but biblically, if you look into this, there was a person in a room who, according to the Bible, the Christian Bible, the Holy Spirit would give a message to. And that person would then begin translating that message into this language that nobody could understand. And the reason that the Holy Spirit gave that person a language that nobody could understand was that so demons or the devil also couldn't understand it, because it was basically a light language. It was this language of spirit. And it was supposed to be a direct communique from God or the Holy Spirit. And if you look into the traditional form of God, it's often a triumvirate: Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit used to be a feminine spirit, but then they broke it down to be a female, and then they broke it down to be a nothing, and then it was just a ghost, the Holy Ghost. They just took some very, very strong Gorilla Tape and just taped her boobies right down and made her the Holy Ghost. So when we talk about light languages, it's somewhat of the same process where people have a language that just channels through them and they begin to speak in this language. Now, generally, there's also someone there. Now we're going back to tongues. I'm ping-ponging between tongues and light language. In tongues, there's generally somebody there who is going to interpret that light language or that tongue. And so in a church, in an evangelical church, you have the I speak in tongues person, and then you have the interpreter person. And in the Christian Bible, it talks about the person who speaks the tongues, and then the person that the Holy Spirit gives the understanding of the tongues to, and they translate the tongues. So you'll still see this phenomenon in some hardcore evangelical churches. Somebody will stand right up and they'll get going, and then somebody else will stand up and start translating. So when we talk about light languages, it's somewhat the same thing, only we don't have a lot of folks who do a lot of translation. We have a lot of folks speaking light languages. And it's ironic to me, these light languages sound an awful lot like tongues, except they tend to be faster. And tongues are oftentimes, they have a lot of L's and vowels, and so somebody will get up there and be like, I'm not speaking in tongues, I am reproducing other people's sounds that have spoken in tongues. Please note that. But it's this, it sounds like you're sort of rapping in Sesame Street. And then they'll go, and they'll go on, and then again, that's sort of the rapping in Sesame Street with the gargling portion. And then somebody else will stand up and they'll say, the Holy Spirit says Jesus is with you, Jesus is healing you. And that person who's translating, if you really watch a real person who's speaking in actual tongues and a real translator, it's a trip because you totally know something's going on. The person who's translating is just spitting this stuff out faster than they can even say it. The person who's speaking in tongues is over there sladdling. And pretty soon you're like, whoa, this is heavy. Wow. So when it really actually happens, it's super cool. It's a mediumship capacity is what it is. And it's a translation capacity by other words. But then we talk about our light languages. We have a lot of people who are translating light languages online. And I know people who speak with light languages. It's just this thing that happens and their fingers go noodly and it's this whole big thing that happens. They sound not quite like tongues because it's almost like a faster, I can't even reproduce it. It's like this, it's like super fast. Whereas the tongues are more this kind of deliberate, I don't know, Sesame Street sounding thing, vowel-y thing. Yet the reason I brought up tongues and light languages is because we have far more light language speakers than we do light language translators, which I think is really interesting. And the point of light languages are not necessarily to be translated per se, but they're supposed to inspire a frequency that comes through a person, and that frequency ignites it ignites DNA and it does all kinds of things in a person's energetic field. So the brain doesn't need the translation. Apparently, light languages are something that creates a vibration in someone's energetic field. So why am I talking about this in the word woke? Well, because I've seen a lot of people who say, I'm woke, I speak light languages. And I want to say, okay, well, are light languages going to help people of color not be choked out in the street? Because if so, let's get to whipping those suckers out. Little biddle kittle schlittle to you too. Let's go. Let's change those ethers. Let's make it happen. And I am in no way poking fun at people who speak light languages. There's a ton of folks out there who do. I'm saying that language is supposed to help the ethers, right? It's supposed to lighten the ethers. However, to say you're woke because you speak a light language, do you see how that doesn't make any sense? Maybe you're a person who is woke who also speaks a light language. So if we could just somehow kind of move away, maybe, from having to make ourselves the biggest, the best, the most, the blah. I mean, if someone else wants to refer to you as the best, thank them. Say thank you. That's very kind. Yet, on my website, you will go to my website. On the first page, it says alumni of Best American Psychics. Because I am. That's a term. That's a name of a website. That's something that's out there. Do I think that makes me the best psychic in America? No. Yet the Best American Psychics is an organization that people are familiar with. So I said, I'm an alumni of this. And, it's very interesting when we use the word best and we use it like best in show or best actress or whatever. And it's used with awards and that makes sense. Yet in the spiritual world, if we are gunning to be set aside by titles instead of the works that we put forward in the world through our hands and our heart, we're going to be at odds with being a spiritual person. And that's why I really get just a chapped hide about this whole I'm a woke, enlightened person, is because, I mean, what kind of person are you trying to attract by putting in your bio, I'm enlightened? I mean, maybe you're trying to say, I've had a really awesome experience and I'm out the other side of it. And maybe that's the only words people have. So again, I'm not trying to shame anybody or pick on anybody, but let's come up with some different terms for that, right? What if you put in your bio somewhere, that why can't we just say, wow, I've really been studying alternative thought and alternative energies, and I'm fascinated by all of it. I feel like I've been given a chance to be awakened to knowledge that's amazing. Awakened to is different than I'm awakened, because I guarantee you there's always going to be an area that we're sleeping, people. The minute we try to say, I'm a woke person, I'm awakened, here I am, then we're going to be whacked because we're going to find a blind spot within ourselves that we may not be that person. And then we're just kind of a weird, disingenuous person saying we're super enlightened when we have blind spots like everybody else. I think another reason that this has gotten under my skin so much, besides the co-opty part of woke, I'm not a fan, is that I think we're trying to evolve into the feminine time frame, which is a time frame where we allow everyone to step forward in their gifts and talents. And there is a need for stewardship to hold a space so that everybody can let their genius shine. And I've looked at people and said, oh my God, you're the best cook, or you're the best medium I've ever met, or whatever. And that's just our terminology. That's how we speak to one another when we're paying a compliment. Yet, to say, okay, these are my accomplishments. I've been voted the best this or the best that, best vocalist, best this or that, especially when they're related to some kind of an award, that makes somewhat sense. But how about as a spiritual community, if we let our actions be the best part of us? Let our actions show our knowledge base. Let the fruits of our labor plant a crop that can feed the many, rather than talking about, I'm the best, most enlightened, most masterful, most bestest, masterest, greatest, killerest, most untouchable, ascended, wokety woke, wokorama, woka wacka woka woo woo woo. Now I'm speaking in tongues here, okay? Why? I think if we can get our propensity to have to prove that we know what we're talking about spiritually, I think if we can get that propensity under control, we'll finally start to believe ourselves. Because think about this. If I'm constantly saying, I'm an angel master, I'm an awakened individual, I'm enlightened, I'm an enlightened ascended master teacher. Boy, it sounds like I'm really trying to convince myself pretty hard, doesn't it? It sounds like I don't believe any of that. But as long as I can see that on my Insta book feed talk profile, then I'm going to feel good about myself. I think instead, if we could maybe just bring through what we're here to bring through, pass through your knowledge, pass through your love, be a sounding board for another person. If somebody says, wow, you are the best listener ever, say thank you. If somebody says, you're the best healer I've ever had, say thank you. If somebody says, you're the best psychic in the world, say thank you. Yet understand and take that compliment and tuck it in there and have it feel great in your heart. Yet understand that doesn't place a crown on any of our heads to be greater than another. Even Jesus talked about that. People kept trying to uplift Jesus back in Jesus' day. And it made Jesus really uncomfortable. If you read the Bible of all these times where they're calling him teacher, rabbi means teacher. And obviously people have titles. Yet they kept talking about, you are going to save us and you and you and you. And he did own some of it in certain areas, but a lot of times he deflected it back to his followers. And he said, well, yeah, I'm doing what I'm here to do. And I'm doing what I'm doing, but you got to do what you're here to do. I'm here to help you. I'm here to inspire you. And that's the part in a lot of our Christian churches which we lose, because we also oftentimes have a pastor up there who is uncomfortable maybe in being that authority. So they're really working hard to hold all the power, to be the pastor, to be, you got to come to me to get God person. And so we've got this system modeled for us of having to be the authority. And there are things, and I'll just kind of jump tracks on you. There are things that I feel very good about being an authority on, not the authority of. Notice that word choice. There are aspects in my life I feel very good about being an authority on, like off-worlders and off-world situations and frequency responses and angelic behavior. I feel like I can speak with authority on those topics because of my life experience. I don't feel like I am the authority on those topics. And I actually got a TV show that passed me over because I wouldn't say that I was the authority on angels. This was years and years ago. And a production company wanted to bill me as the authority on angels. And I said, but I'm not. I mean, at the time, before Doreen Virtue kind of ditched out of her work, there was Doreen Virtue and there was Mother Teresa. And there were tons of people who were communicating with angelic life. And I said, you guys can't call me the number one angel, blah, blah, blah. Come on, man. How about, yes, I am an angel translator because I am. And they said, well, we need to tell everybody you're the best one. I'm like, how about if I just do my job well and those folks who relate with what I do come back to the show and watch it week after week? Now there's a thought. I don't have to be the Christ Danielle angel master. Let's all do what we do well, gang. And as I'm coming up on the end of this podcast, I would like to make note that when I got my gallbladder carved out, I felt a great deal of relief because my gallbladder was so sick that it had gotten really infected. And it had 1 and 2 centimeter gallstones in it, and it had blocked off the entry to my gallbladder with this giant stone. And then my flesh grew around the stone like a tree growing around a rock. So it was like a cork in a bottle full of infection. It was disgusting. I hope you're not eating. So because that organ was so sick, it backed up into the infection into my liver. So my liver was infected. Now, you might be asking yourself, geez, Danielle, if you are somebody who deals with medical scans for other people, and how could you not know you weren't feeling well? Well, I actually did know something was up with me. I knew it. I could feel it. I couldn't put my finger on it. I thought maybe it was hormones because, like I said, I'm going to be 52 in 5 minutes. So I'm thinking to myself, oh, God, is this like a hormonal shift? Is that why I'm tired all the time? Or is that why I can eat 500 pounds of red meat and I still feel like I'm starving? I mean, what's going on with my iron levels? This is so weird. And actually, it was that I had a sick organ. And when that organ got taken out and they intravenously pumped me full of tons of antibiotics, it was about after that week, which is June 22nd, I think, right around there. After I came out of surgery, I felt, besides kind of high as a kite, but I felt great. And I felt better than I'd felt in my whole life that I could remember because I wasn't full of infection anymore. And when we give away our need to hang on to this infected sense of self, like think about that need to be so desperate to be the expert in a field or the one and only, or we're trained to be so competitive with one another. And let's think about that as an infected pocket on our sense of self. When we cut that off because it's just been plugged up with this shame and this fear that we're going to be overlooked. And all it does is it backs up and infects everything else. It infects our confidence. It infects our ability to believe ourselves. And then we might, suffer from potential imposter syndrome because we know we have this infected sense of self that really is informing the rest of our being inappropriately. And the rest of our being is having to adjust to make room for this one sick thing in ourselves. And I think about that gallbladder coming out for me as a liberating factor. My diet has changed a ton. I used to eat these massively huge meals. I still eat a ton of food, but I have to eat like 4,000 times a day now because of the way that my body is digesting the food. Your gallbladder basically holds a bag of bile, and like a squeegee of ketchup on a hot dog. If you eat something that requires more bile to digest it, like tomatoes or eggs or red meat, you get that little ketchup squirt of bile, and it adds to the pile and it helps break food down. When you don't have that, your body has to figure out how to break the fats down, and so it craves different things at different times. And I haven't had one drop of alcohol at all since my surgery, besides like a sip. I had a sip for Valentine's Day just because I'm giving my liver a break. I had no idea it was infected. Yet why I'm saying this to you is that if we take care, we cut out the part that's infected, and we begin to adjust our sense of self accordingly for the changes that our spiritual body is trying to make, when we're not trying to justify who we are because we're so enlightened or we're so woke or we're just so fabulous or we're so the light language lady that's so amazing and so enlightened and untouchable and mastered this and ascended and wow, we're cooler than everybody and isn't everyone impressed down here? You know, when we give away that infected part of self, and it's infected with insecurity, that's why it goes there. And it's hard, gang. And if you're somebody that struggles with this, I'm not making fun of you. Hell, I've struggled with this in my life, coming from entertainment. You know, where they want to push you to say you're the best, and you charge the most as an actor, and all these things. And I've worked through my own issues with what's the difference between the value and the quality of the work that I put into the world, and what's the difference between faking it till you make it. I mean, I came out of entertainment. Hello. So, I mean, I understand it. So I'm not trying to shame anybody here, gang. I'm simply saying if you're somebody that really, really struggles, and again, titles aside, if you're a PhD, you are, if you're a Reiki master, you are, whatever, all the titles aside, if you struggle in this area, understand that overload of insecurity has probably infected a portion of your sense of self. And we need to kind of get rid of that, right? We need to cut it out so that the body can say, God, you know what? I'm freaking great at what I do. I don't need to call myself the most enlightened guru, master, ascended, hybrid, not even barely human, I'm so amazing person. How about just showing people my work in the world and letting the world decide where that falls? And we have such a fear to do that because we come from a world that was trained to shut out genius and to shut out brilliance and to shut you out if you're a person of color and to shut you out if you're a woman and to shut you out if you're an intergender person and to shut you out if you're a person with no gender, a non-binary person, an LGBTQ person. We come from a world where we had to bluff our way through the door to get to the poker game. And all I'm saying to you, gang, is, let's love ourselves. And if you've earned all those titles, congratulations. That is really freaking cool. I bet you put a ton of time into that. If you're someone who struggles with thinking you need to call yourself the greatest thing since sliced bread, or people won't think you're great, a word of advice: let your actions be great and allow people to call you great. Yet when we've got to call ourselves the most fabulous thing ever, unless it's tongue-in-cheek, like, I'll tell you I make the best spaghetti sauce on the earth. You know what I'm saying? I'm Italian. We all make the best spaghetti sauce. Just ask any of us. We've got to deal with the part of our sense of self that's infected. And that's what this podcast is about, is understand that part in all of us may need some self-care. There is a difference between healthy acknowledgement of your gifts and talents, of things that you're great at, and just going off the rails in self-grandizing, being the most wokey, awakened, wackadoodle, waka wiki wiki waka waka hika haka maka shaka saka take a tiki tuku taka paka person you could ever be. Okay? And if I get a note from any one of you that translated to I want an otter pop, I will send you a t-shirt. I'm just saying. Oh, my Lord. Gang, it feels so good to be back with you. It feels so good. And again, just a quick note, I am putting the finishing touches on quite a library of podcasts that got hung up because I got sick. So we're going to just be cramming these through the pipeline for you guys so you can get the content. So much stuff to talk about. I love all of you. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for the unbelievable well wishes that you sent me during this time of recovery. I'm so grateful for that. And I will see you next podcast.